I am.
All right. Yeah, so like Linda said, what I'd like to do today is a workshop on writing your own about page. And we'll touch on what about pages are and why they're important here in a minute. I've got a slide here of an introduction to me, but you all know me already. I'll just recap it quickly. I started a web design business in 2019, and I quickly learned that the most powerful part of your website is really the words that you use and the messaging. So that prompted me to add copywriting to my services. And now I'm specializing in websites for financial advisors and money coaches. So that's just a little bit about me. As far as about pages, the reason why they're so important is because one is that they typically are the second most visited page on your website. The first is your home page. That gets the most visits, but people often go to your about page because they want to learn more about you. It's also where people go if they're a little bit closer to making a decision to hire you. They're a little bit further down the sales funnel. Again, so they just want to take that extra step to learn even more about you than what they already know. It's also an important page on your website because it's actually about you. Some of the other pages are really focused more on your ideal client or customer and how your service helps them, but your about page is really where you can talk about yourself more. But I do have in parentheses here, but not only about you, and we'll talk about more what that means in a minute. They also humanize your business and may help you make a personal connection. So both of those things are really important to somebody making a decision to either hire you or buy your product, especially if you can create a "Hey, me too" moment. And that's why sharing some personal details is important, especially if somebody's looking at your website and then somebody else who does something very similar. Just a small connection or something you have in common can make somebody say, "Oh, well, me too. I want to talk to this person," and make you more relatable. And then I have down here of making you more choosable. So I wanted to start by asking, what has your experience been writing about yourself? And this can be for your website or maybe an elevator pitch. Does anybody want to share?
So mine tends to be much more factual and date oriented, and it's almost like a historical account. It lacks that personality that I have, which can be a blessing and a curse. So that's why I was really interested to come today. Said I was born in New York City. I graduated from this high school. I went to this college. That kind of stuff tends to be a little bit, I don't know, boring even, I think. So, I mean, somebody could say, "Oh, I grew up in New York too." I mean, it's not like you can't have a Me Too moment from factual information, but I think, and then I worry also, I was a single mom with 3 kids. I don't know if I want to say that or not. I don't know what I want to say about myself. I think that's the problem. There's a lot of things you could say about me. What are the right things to say? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, and I think some of that is tying it to, what does the person, how can you make a connection with the person coming, like what might be relevant? But yes, I can certainly see that being, trying to decide which parts of yourself to share can be difficult. Does anybody else want to share? Okay, it's no problem if not. I'll keep on going. So I put some challenges here that I know that I've experienced. Imposter syndrome. So if you're doing something new, either a new business or you're growing in your business, I think imposter syndrome can creep in and can make it hard to write about ourselves. And then the inner critic, we tend to be much more harsh and judgmental about ourselves then we might be about somebody else, and then time as another factor. Finding the time, especially when we have so much else going on in our businesses. So one thing I wanted to talk about is this idea of writer's mode. Sometimes once we sit down to write, we kind of enter a different mode, more of a thinking mode, and that can really create writer's block, especially if we're staring at a blank page. So what I'm going to start with here is some strategies that I use to break through writer's block and that feeling of not knowing how to start. The first is to warm up with free writing. So this comes from a book by Julia Cameron. And the idea is that you can do this either by hand. I do it on the computer because I don't like writing by hand. And you just write 750 words or for 20 minutes, whichever comes first. And you literally write whatever is on your mind. So you don't stop, you don't edit. And it is kind of like a stream of conscious. It could even be, I don't know what to write. I'm just here typing whatever's on your mind. And this is actually something I try to do it. I don't do it daily, but I try to do it regularly. And it's just a really good way to basically get everything out of your head and onto the sheet of paper. And it can really clear your mind then to work on a writing after that. So that's one tip. And the next tip is that kind of embracing this idea, this quote from Ernest Hemingway which I'm not going to read directly since it has a bad word in it, but the idea that the first draft is probably not going to be the final, and that it's okay if it's bad. It's okay if it's not finalized, that it's just more about getting the ideas down on the paper. And that can help prevent you getting frozen by trying to choose the exact right words. And then using sentence prompts is a great way so that you're not starting with a blank page. And I'll show you some of the sentence prompts here in a little bit, and can also help organize your writing and kind of structure what you're going to share. And then the last tip is to write a letter to a friend. Now, I know this sounds silly, but again, it's just another strategy to get out of the thinking mode and more into a free writing mode. And so what I mean by that is literally starting out like you're writing an email, hi, Amy, how are you? It's been so long since we talked. And if you can get into that sort of mode of like you're catching up with a friend, ideas and the words that you use can come more easily. So those are my tips for getting through writer's block. So what should you include? So this is who I am and what I do. You want it to be really clear. And ideally, you want to connect with your audience's problem or goal. So this line here, that's referring to what I said before about your about pages. They are about you, but not just about you, right? And that's a way that you can really bring in your audience and make a connection specific to the problem that they need solved. You want to state your credentials. It's a great place to boost credibility, which increases trust. Share your origin story. A lot of times there's an interesting story of how we started our businesses, and people find that interesting. And it's also, it can be, especially if you started your business because maybe you've gone through a struggle or situation and it relates to why you started your business. That can be a very powerful story to share. And then share what you love and why you continue. We'll touch a little bit more on that here in a moment. And then lastly, some irreverent details. So those could be that you have a pet dog or your children or whatever personal details you want to share. Again, the idea to make a connection.
I thought it said irrelevant. I'm like, why would we have irrelevant details? But then I was like, have another sip of coffee, Linda. It's irreverent.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Silly. I'm sorry to.
No, it's okay. It's a good clarification. Okay, so this is a set of sentence prompts that you can use as a starting point. Again, the idea is that you're not having to start from a blank page. And I think one thing to keep in mind too is, you don't have to, these aren't written in stone, so they can be changed, but it's just a way to provide a structure and to get ideas flowing. So the first one, you're here because, that's a great way if you don't, oops, I didn't mean to go, let me try to, sorry, I didn't mean to go forward. Okay, can you all still see that?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so you're here because, that's a great way to start it if you don't know how to start or make an introduction, to directly connect to the problem that that you solve for your client. And I'll show you an example here in a minute. And then I became whatever your role is because I feel feelings when I get to, and then some small moment, customer related. So these types of things, the small moments, are actually great ways to show how you work with people. And they also can be more relatable. Sometimes we feel like we have to share these, big moments or big accomplishments, but these small day-to-day interactions that we have with customers are actually just as important. What's most important to me? So that can be if you have a philosophy or value, a great way to integrate that. I never thought this would happen, especially after. So if there's been any sort of adversity that you faced, that can be a good way to lead into that. And then these last two are about more personal details, when I'm not working, and then some things my friends know about me. Again, that's a way to pull in those non-work related items that help people connect with you. Any questions so far?
I think it would be great if we could email these prompts to everybody who attended.
Yes.
If you're comfortable with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can give you a copy of the slides, or I can also just send the prompts.
Well, I don't want to rip off the whole presentation, but the prompts are really, because if we're trying to take notes and we can't listen, but we really need the prompts. So I was just thinking, maybe I'll just interject. And one person already in the chat said, see if you can get the prompts. So.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. Yes, we can do that. And I will share too, I've got just a source here that this is a strategy that I learned from a course I took over the summer by somebody named Belinda Weaver. So I just want to give her credit.
Oh, that's nice. And the name of it is the Copyright Incubator. That's cool.
Yes, it's an intensive copywriting course that I did. So yeah, but I think that this is such a good strategy and just a way to get started if you're having trouble. So
what was the page before this, before the prompts?
Yeah, so the page before this, which is also, I would say we could include this one as well, what you should include.
Yeah.
And these two, they tie in together.
Yeah, they do.
What I would recommend is you can start with the sentence prompts and then go back to this and say, well, is there anything else I can pull in? Like, did I state my credentials? Is there something about my origin story that should be included? That's how I think these two slides sort of work together.
Yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah, I told you she's great. That's why I'm excited.
Thank you. Okay, so now I just wanted to show an example of how I use these sentence prompts. Let me go up here. So here, I just have a quick intro with somebody's name as if I was writing a letter. But actually, when I did this, I wrote it to a friend from high school, and I had a much longer where I, asked her how she was doing and told her about me, just to get into that, again, a more free-flowing mode of writing. But you can see that I've used the sentence prompts here. So I just say my name, I'm a financial planner turned website copywriter. You're here because you want a website that gets noticed by your ideal clients and sets you apart from your competition. Again, so that's
That's a
connected
great
to
line.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Yeah, that's connecting directly to what my visitor wants. And it's good to do that up front because people are still kind of in what's in it for me.
Right. So maybe I could say you're here because you want to get your financial house in order so that you can sleep better at night. Am I right? Wouldn't that
Yeah.
kind of follow your pattern there?
Yes, exactly. And then
Very
you're both saying what you do and then the larger outcome for your client, which is great. So I became a website copywriter because I fell in love with the idea that anyone, anywhere can have a spotlight on the internet. Then I learned how the right words on your website can captivate readers and was hooked. So for me, then I'm, sharing a little bit about what drew me to the profession, but also a little value here as far as the right words captivating readers. Again, what's in it for my potential client. I have this paragraph here about specializing in websites for financial advisors. And this is where, I looked at the list and said, okay, well, I need something about my experience in that field and some credibility boosters that I have the CFP certification. So it's safe to know that, or safe to say that I know a thing or two about financial planning. My favorite part of my work is walking my clients through the project step by step so they don't feel overwhelmed. I feel warm and fuzzy when they tell me they love their website and comment on how easy the process was. So these are the things that people have told me. And it's also common objections, I think, to working with a web designer is concern that it's going to be a project that is overwhelming or that they won't be they will be unhappy with the end product. So that's part of what my the choices I made here are addressing those objectives. And it also shows too, this is a big part of my service. So I'm not looking for people who want speed. I'm looking for people who find technology overwhelming and are a good fit for kind of being walked through the process. And then lastly, what's most important to me is that your website reflects you as an advisor and that you can't wait to show it off to everyone you know. And then when I'm not working, I'm chasing my boy, girl, toddler twins. I also love going for morning walks to watch the clouds float by. And then I have some notes here about how I used to play tennis. And I'll play tennis again one day, hopefully. Mostly what I do now is this. So I think it's hard for me to add on to that.
Of course. Yeah. The only way you could not do that is if you had a nanny. Like Meghan Markle and Princess Diana. So.
Yeah. And so again, so this is just an example. It doesn't have to be necessarily big ideas or complex. It's just more about showing the value, showing how you solve a person's problem, and then making that personal connection, adding anything that you have that can boost your credibility. And then again, just giving it a more personal feel.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing is you're saying something about yourself that you can tie to a benefit for your client.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's what I'm seeing you do consistently here. You're saying something about yourself, like, so for example, I'm a financial advisor and we have a thick layer of compliance in our industry that's daunting. So you can't go to just anybody because they could say and do things that could, get your license revoked. So we need somebody who's mindful of the industry compliance rules, which clearly she would be because she carries the same certifications to me. So that's also very powerful. I don't know if you guys realize that or not, because everyone else on the call doesn't have the same licenses as me and Allison, but I know that any other financial would see that and think, oh, good, thank God. Yeah, I probably could work with her, kind of a feeling.
Yes, no, that's a great point, Linda, and definitely something I can incorporate.
And also, oh, she's not going to be a client. Sometimes when you do business with somebody, you think, oh, I'll do business with you, you'll do business with me. But that also sends a clear message, don't bother.
Yes.
Which is fine. I'm just pointing out some obvious things.
Yeah. So that's just a quick example. And then I've just got one more slide here. What if you try this and you're still stuck? Or if this is just not resonating with you? Well, one is to just take a break. That's again, if you're working on it. But another thing too to consider is like, you actually don't have to start by writing. You can talk it out. You can record yourself on Zoom and then get the transcript, or get the audio file and create a transcript, or maybe even talk with a friend. So those are just some other tips. If the writing's still not working for you, talking can be a great way to get the words in a more natural way too. Actually, in my process for copywriting, I interview my clients and get them to talk about their business so that I can get those words that they use. And again, it's just because it's typically more natural than how we write. So,
and it's funny, I've heard that introverts like to write and extroverts like to talk. And so that could be a factor in what you're more comfortable with, is that dynamic of your personality. Have you ever heard that before, Allison, by any chance?
I think it makes total sense. Yeah. I mean, I've heard a similar thing when I've, again, heard this tip about if writing's not working, just try talking. So I can see how personality can factor into that, what comes more naturally.
Yeah.
All right. So that is what I had. Do you all have any questions?
I think I'm going to stop the recording for questions. How do you feel about that?
That's perfectly fine.